Hey, Nick, Sean Spicer. I understand there's some controversy brewing about how many subscribers you have on YouTube. You have more subscribers than anybody. Then it's probably the biggest, largest YouTube subscription that anybody's had. But also, it's not numbers that matter, Nick. And I know everyone's going to quibble over this, but it's content. It's quality, and your subscribers are amazing. They're great. They're high quality subscribers, and that's really what you have to look at. Don't just focus on the numbers. I mean, if people are spewing a bunch of fake news, just don't get in the mud. They're amazing folks. Their engagement, the way that they like the videos. Anyway, I hope this puts this to the end. I hope that this controversy is over, and we know who the real YouTube subscriber champ is, and it's you, Nick.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Downtime. Thank you so much for joining Lance and I. Lance, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Glad to hear it. Well, so there's a lot of interesting stuff to cover. I'd like to get into a little bit of a dissection of what it means to have law and order, and I think we'll get into that. Or
lack thereof.
Or lack thereof. Yeah. You brought up the boat, the Venezuelan boat attack, which we haven't actually discussed. We've been talking a lot about Epstein. We're going to talk about some of the things about that tonight because I find some things there fascinating. But the boat attack we haven't talked about, and since you were in the Navy, I would like to get your take on that attack. So could you explain to our audience what happened and why it might not have been legal?
Well, based on the information that's been released, the boat was assessed to be a drug smuggling boat.
Mm-hmm.
And nobody said this, but I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. The boat was trying to flee whoever it was that was trying to stop them. And so they fired on and destroyed the boat, and presumably all hands aboard were lost. So let's put this in context of a regular police action in your town. Cop sees somebody selling drugs on the street. He yells, "Stop, thief," or whatever, and he runs after them and they flee. Does the policeman have justification to draw his service weapon and shoot said individual who was fleeing, who has not displayed any violent intent, who has not shown that he's carrying a gun or anything? He's just a guy who's running away. Can the cop shoot him? And I think that's pretty well established that no, he can't. Deadly force is only authorized in very specific, narrow criteria, and that didn't meet it. Well, the same applies at sea. With military forces, you can't shoot at and sink some ship just because you don't like them or they're not stopping when you tell them to. You have to follow the ROE, the rules of engagement. And the rules of engagement say you don't shoot them unless they've shot at you. So nothing in any of the video imagery I've seen of the incident shows that the guys on the boat were brandishing weapons or anything. So why did they shoot them? It's a violation of ROE, and one would assume every serving military officer knows this. So I think it's a fair guess that the order to open fire came from on high. Was it Hegseth? Who knows? Was it the Orange Baboon? Who knows? But somebody up the chain basically authorized deadly force to murder the people on that boat without cause. And it also brings up a second question, which is, and I don't know if this has changed since I was active, but it used to be that the military, because posse comitatus, could not arrest people that suspecting of drug smuggling or human trafficking on their own. They had to have a Coast Guard individual present because the Coast Guard is a law enforcement organization. The military is not, unless specifically designated as such. And I seriously doubt that was done in this case. Nobody said anything to that effect. So it's a very suspicious, and I would argue illegal act. So yeah, I think Congress ought to, launch an investigation, find out who's on tap for ordering the murder of how many people were aboard that boat, because that's what it is. It's bald-faced murder.
Oh, and I'd like to point out a couple of things. So Reuters has been investigating and has said that while Trump did post video bragging about, and I've always find it interesting, like he sends the military to go do something, they do something, and he brags as if he did it. He sticks his chest out like, yeah, man, I'm the one who, it's like, no, you have bone spurs. You're the guy who yeah. So he posted video of this, and the boat is speeding away, ostensibly trying to get away, and is hit. Now, according to Reuters, that as of this moment, the administration has not provided any evidence that any ship or any asset, American asset, was under attack by that vessel or threatened by that vessel. They provided no evidence that that vessel was armed. And they have provided no evidence that that vessel was being used by that drug cartel. Not that it would matter for the reasons that you just outlined. We are not at war with that drug cartel. Now, we've talked about Trump sort of trying to shoehorn in we're at war with them by declaring a state of war, yada, yada, yada. But it's a little bit like war with poverty. We've been at war with poverty for who knows how long. You can trend out. This was an unarmed ship, at least that anybody can tell. And Abrego Garcia, all of the evidence, quote evidence, that has been brought up to show that he was a member of MS-13 was fake. All of it. Fake. People have looked at it and said, no, this is not how it works. And it doesn't take a genius to look at it. And so, like, they said, oh, his knuckles, MS-13. And it's like, no, that's not what those tattoos mean. And experts in gangs have said that is not what those tattoos mean. Some idiot just decided, well, it means those things for whatever reasons. And these are post hoc rationalizations. He was arrested initially because in addition to having other non-nationals in his car, he had a bull's cap on, which apparently the devil horns is in fact a sign used by MS-13, but the problem is it's also used by the Chicago Bulls. So if you're wearing a Bulls shirt, I guess they get to shoot and kill you. Is that the dear
Well,
Lord?
Chicago is predominantly going to vote for blue, so shooting them is perfectly authorized according to the president.
Well, and that gets us to so it's an interesting thing that the crime-ridden states aren't the ones that actually have crime by any metric. The top 10 states with the worst crime, top 10 cities with the worst crime, 8 are red, 2 are blue. But the only cities that he's considered sending military to are the blue cities. So Chicago is not even in the top 100 most crime-ridden cities in the United States. They are not in the top 100. And he's going to send them there? And there are actual red state Republicans saying, why aren't we getting the National Guard? So, yeah, it's and I had this discussion about New Orleans. He's going to send them to New Orleans. And what a lot of people don't realize is New Orleans is south of the Mason-Dixon line. It is in the deep south. It is in Louisiana. And while it is one of the most liberal cities in the United States, it's more liberal than New York. It's far more liberal than New York. It's about San Francisco kind of liberal. It has a lot of the Southern hospitality, the Southern sentimentality, including but not limited to the Southern suspicion of government and law enforcement. So you may think you're deploying troops to a liberal city. You're deploying them to in many ways, a very conservative city that knows how and is interested in defending itself from law enforcement if they have to. And somebody had pointed out that we may end up seeing some National Service Guard members being used as gator bait down there. It's not a joke. They detest that kind of thing. In a way that most liberal cities don't.
That's the point.
Wow.
I think.
Yep.
I think he's trying to provoke him so that he can then declare martial law in that city or that state and arrest everybody who's an elected official who's Democratic, because obviously they're in cahoots with these rebels.
Well, and he said that he doesn't want anyone to ever have to vote again. You know, that's the only way to actually go about doing it. You had also said something else, and we saw, I don't think I'm going to play it again, I do have it, but the video of them arresting the subway attacker. And when I say subway attacker, I don't mean in a subway. I mean he took a Subway sandwich and threw it at one of the National Guardsmen. And there's this clack-on sound like, as the police are coming in and breaking into this guy's house and arrest him. And I think there was 36 officers there to do this arrest. And it's like his lawyer offered to bring him in. He had actually worked for the government and, you know, surrendered and was completely cooperating. And they decided to make this huge deal about it just to terrify people. And then they put it on the White House website.
Exactly what they want.
That was.
This is all about terrorizing people into compliance. The next step will be to start getting people to report on their neighbors, kind of thing.
I remember when that was originally in the original version of the Patriot Act.
Yeah,
and it's supposed to be the Republicans who are against that kind of thing.
They're against it if somebody from the other side is in power. If they're in power, hey, this is really cool shit.
That was one of the things that Zandring always says that I really like is, you know, only give yourself the powers that you would want the other side to have. And most Republicans don't think that way. They're like, oh, I'll just take. To be fair, I think most Democrats don't think that way either. But yeah. All right, let's see. We got 2 super chats. Sinister Porpoise, $5.12. Naziferatu Miller is likely targeting Chicago in September because of its Mexican Independence Day celebration. Ooh, that's an interesting. I hadn't thought of that. Yeah. Well, and I actually thought, and we're going to go live as soon as it happens because I think it's big news. In fact, his doing it in L.A. has been found to violate posse comitatus. We're going to read from that. We were supposed to cover that Monday. We didn't because the press conference, Tuesday. The press conference was, I thought, so important. We just did the press conference. But we're going to cover the judge ruling that he has violated posse comitatus, at least in L.A. There's no governor of D.C. The governor of D.C. is in theory the president. So whether or not he's violating it there, I think nobody's bothered. He probably is, but
except he didn't deploy the D.C. police. He also deployed out of state.
Yes,
National Guardsmen. That definitely crosses the line.
That's a very good point. And in fact, in each case, he appears to have deliberately deployed the ones out of state more than from in state. Probably
Good, loyal people from red states to go beat up the blues.
Yep. Stephen Walsh, $2. Commander, hope the knees are well.
Yeah. It takes about a year, according to most orthopedic surgeons. It takes about a year for you to fully recover from the surgery. And I can definitely tell that because the one knee, which is almost exactly, well, tomorrow will be exactly 1 year, that's in pretty good condition and I can get around on it and it doesn't cause me much problem. The other one, which is, only about 6 months into the healing process, yeah, that still gives me occasional issues. It likes to go, we're not putting weight on me today, are we? Watch what happens when you do.
So, well, and it always blows my mind when you say the hip ones are actually easier and faster. That blows my mind.
Everybody I've talked to who's done that, and that includes my orthopedic surgeon, because I was looking at getting my hips done too. And yeah, he says typically people are walking on them the day out. I mean, they'll have a cane or something, but yeah, I mean, the next day you're walking.
Just because it's a ball and socket joint, I think it would be so much more complex, but shows you what I know about medicine.
I think the big issue is that when you replace the hip, you're not necessarily cutting a lot of muscles that go there.
You're not detaching,
replacing the joint itself. When you do the replacement of a knee, you have to cut a lot of the muscles that go into your upper thigh.
All right. That makes a lot of sense.
Now they staple them back on, but at that point, the muscles are saying, this isn't what we signed up for, dude.
I had a friend of mine earlier. I just think this is funny because we're talking about the liberals and conservatives. Said, and we're a liberal show. We acknowledge that. We have on 𝐒𝐸𝐿𝐴, who I hope represents a pretty decent conservative position. But even he's looking at most of what's going on, going like, "Wow." I mean, this is because he's McCain kind of conservative, and McCain would not have, I think, approved of almost any of this.
Now, this is not conservative politics. This is something else.
Well, this is it's fascist, and so what I'm sitting there going is like
fascism.
Yeah. So we're a liberal channel espousing in many instances conservatism, because we talk about defending the establishment. So this channel is espousing conservative views in defense against fascism.
That shows you how the American political spectrum has shifted. It used to be a distinctly Democrats on the left, Republicans on the right. And now what we have is Republicans on the far right, Democrats on the right.
Yep.
And there's this large gaping void on the left side.
Yeah. And Europeans will say that. The Europeans have been saying that for a while, actually, that there is no real hard left on or far left on the in the U.S. And there hasn't been. We've been intolerant of it, I think, because of the Cold War, would be my argument, was there was so much propaganda in the U.S. against communism that anything associated with communism, socialism, whether people know what those terms mean or not, the second, Bernie Sanders, people are still afraid of, like, he shouldn't have, I don't think he should have gone with the socialism moniker. I understand why he did it. And I said, no, I'm a socialist. It's just like you just made yourself unelectable. I appreciate that you're trying to educate people about what the term actually means, but you're going to be voted for by people who don't know what that term means or voted against. So those are the voters.
For most Americans, socialism and communism are synonymous.
Yep. So it's a little weird to be sitting here fighting for the establishment, going like, I thought I was on the that's how this country just moved right underneath me. I'm just like, wait a minute, wait. No, I'm not on the right. Yes, I am. Wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah. All right. So let's see. So we were talking about Trump firing or somebody ordering the shooting of what appears to be an unarmed vessel in international waters that was fleeing. Now, the argument that I hear often is, well, why run if you didn't do anything? Let me tell you something, they say this with cops. I think your cop analogy is great. If cops start yelling at you and go, hey, yo, stay right there, your first instinct is going to be to run, even if you've done nothing wrong. It's just the way we're wired.
Yeah. And let's assume that was happening here. They're on international calling frequency. Stop and prepare to be boarded. These guys don't speak English.
Mm-hmm.
And so you've got this big ship with big guns bearing down on you. Yeah, I'd run too.
Yep. And apparently they were hit with an airstrike.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the full weight of the U.S. military. It's not just this ship. They called it in. And
now,
the reason
when I was serving in counter narcotics coordination, the Coast Guard had specifically trained up snipers. It was the first time in their history they had done so. And the snipers weren't there to shoot the drug smugglers. The snipers were there to ride in the helicopter and shoot the engine block of the boat that was fleeing so that it would come to a dead halt. And they did that very successfully multiple times. So why wasn't that tried here?
That's it's this, we're America and we're badasses, and that's why we don't have to play nice, and if we were a country that was genuinely under siege, maybe I could see the argument, but we're the richest country in the world, arguably until Trump, one of the most successful countries in human history, and we have to just blow up these boats because there's a health issue in the United States that's been criminalized for political reasons. That's utterly insane. The reason I brought up Garcia was because as of this moment that I've seen, there hasn't been a single. If Garcia were guilty, the evidence would be everywhere. And the reason is because this administration would say, see, we got it right. We got it right. He would get him out. There's been no evidence, and in fact, all of the evidence is that MS-13 does know who he is and has wanted him dead for a very long time. That's why he was not supposed to be deported back to Venezuela, explicitly for that reason. So he does have a connection to MS-13, but it's not what the U.S. government is saying, and a federal judge already made that determination and said he can't be sent back to Venezuela for that reason. So this guy who, as of this moment, may have committed a crime by crossing illegally, did turn himself in, did follow a procedure, was now still following that procedure. And so the appropriate action of a just country is to take him to a human rights violating prison that nobody ever walks out of. And as of yet, nobody seems to really care that there's no evidence that he's committed any crime other than coming to this country illegally.
Yeah.
And so now you can blow up boats for the same thing. It's like, well, we suspect that it's an MS-13 boat, and maybe they had intelligence that it was. Again, you point out, even if it doesn't give them the right to destroy it. The MS-13 actually MS-13 has made a statement that we're not at war with the United States. That they're not a country.
I will simply note from my time with GIADF West, Joint Interagency Task Force on the West Coast, that the intel we would get was wrong about 50% of the time.
Really?
That boat's carrying stuff, and we'd go out and somebody board it and search it. There was nothing there. Now, they might have thrown the stuff overboard, but usually not. So hard to say.
Well, and the problem is, I mean, intelligence is a fickle thing because people will lie for various reasons. Think McCarthy. The number of people that lied to Congress about who was involved, who was a communist, just so that they could get out from underneath a thumb. And the whole thing was fabricated.
And usually the confidential informants that they're working with down there oftentimes are getting paid when they give you information. Even if it's not valid information, they still get paid.
Yeah.
Is that an incentive to make things up?
Yeah. Well, and swatting happens too. You don't like somebody, so you make up something about them just to watch the police go kick in their door. You got to be very careful when blowing up other ships at sea with the world's most powerful military. This was Justice Breyer. Now, the name is going to sound familiar, and the reason why is I think he's the younger brother of Chief Justice Breyer on the U.S. Supreme Court. Now, his decision was very carefully written. It wasn't written for the plaintiffs or for the defendants. It was written for the appeals court because he knew that this was going to go up to, I believe it's the Ninth Circuit on appeal, and then probably go up to the U.S. Supreme Court. And so he addressed very specific problems that the Ninth Circuit had had previously when trying to limit Donald Trump's authority, and it hadn't been around posse comitatus, so he is very clear and succinct here, and this is one of the things that he said. In fact, this is, I love this, it's beautifully and simply put. Congress spoke clearly in 1878 when it passed the Posse Comitatus Act, prohibiting the use of U.S. military to execute domestic law. Nearly 140 years later, defendants President Trump, Secretary of Defense Hegseth, and the Department of Defense deployed the National Guard and Marines to Los Angeles, ostensibly to quell a rebellion and ensure that the federal immigration law was enforced. There were indeed protests in Los Angeles, and some individuals engaged in violence. But there was no rebellion, nor was there civilian law enforcement unable to respond to the protests and enforce the law. Nevertheless, the defendants' orders, contrary to Congress's explicit instruction, federal troops executed the laws. The evidence at trial established that the defendants systematically used armed soldiers whose identity was often obscured by protective armor and military vehicles to set up a protective perimeter and to set up traffic blockades, engage in crowd control, and otherwise demonstrate a military presence in and around Los Angeles. In short, defendants violated the Posse Comitatus Act. That's it.
Yeah. And nothing will come of it.
Yeah,
just as nothing is going to come of this boat being destroyed.
Well, the U.S. has now been put on the Human Rights Watch for violation.
Deservedly so.
Yeah, I'm surprised it took this long. And I don't know. It's I used to do a lot of, as you know, sort of anti-theistic work, and one thing that Sam Harris used to say, and I thought was always an interesting point: how do you reason with people who don't value reason? If people value their faith over reason, how do you reason them out of it? There's no way to do it. And for people who value the image of the United States, speaking of, Donald Trump has apparently now officially ordered the change of the Department of Defense to the Department of War. So that is now a change. He has said, and I went to Fox News and read a little bit about what is, because that was the easiest place to find his pontificating on the idea of the warrior, we have to portray ourselves as warriors. And I'd really like to know, when did America get so bad over the last 10 years that we have to upend absolutely everything? I mean, there isn't rioting in the streets. Crime isn't at an all-time high. It's nowhere near where it used to be in the 80s, and nobody in the 80s said, we have to become a warrior culture, shoot and blow up people who are running away from... you look like you're about to say something, please.
Yeah, I was going to say, that's all part of the 2025 plan, which is get people believing that things are so bad that you have to completely take away all their civil rights in order to save them. It's no different than what the Nazis did, literally.
Yeah.
Send street gangs out there to start fights and then claim that, oh, if you elect us, we'll stop all the fighting in the streets. Yeah, of course you will, because you'll tell your guys not to provoke any more incidents.
We'll stop all the fires in the Reichstag if you just... Yeah.
And that's exactly what's going on here. And all the rebranding of stuff is to make them seem powerful and authoritarian. Look at me. I'm the big gorilla in the cage.
Which impresses all the wrong people. It impresses the masses, but it doesn't impress foreign leaders. It's no. Putin's not sitting there going like, oh, it's the Department of War now? Oh my God, I have to take the United States seriously. Nobody, in fact, it makes us look like idiots because it's like, yeah, rebranding is going to change everything. Yeah. All right.
But that's kind of, and it's not necessarily just authoritarians. I'll give you a case example, which is that whenever a new chief of the Army or chief of the Air Force or whatever comes into his position, there's so little stuff he can do to actually put his thumbprint on it. So the first thing they often do is change the uniform. So the Army has gone from ball caps to berets, back to ball caps again. Now they're, we went away from the green jacket. Now we're wearing the olive drab jacket from World War II because it looks so much more inspiring. And you do this because it's your way of saying, hey, look at me. I was here. I changed that. Except your successor is going to change it back or change it to something different. And I remember when Reagan was in office, one of the things that was done was they changed the uniforms of the uniformed security personnel in and around the building. And it was this, I swear to God, it was this ridiculous. It looked like you were one of those marching bands in the Macy's parade or whatever. It was purple and white and gold and just
oh my God,
idiotic. Yeah, and it was done because Nancy Reagan wanted to show that she was in charge. Well, you see the same thing here with Trump because we're going to plow up the Rose Garden and put something else in. Because the Rose Garden is put in place by a Democrat. Now we're going to have a good, honest Republican concrete slab.
The Rose Garden's been there for how many years? Like 150 or?
It was there prior to the Kennedys, but that was one of Jackie's big projects, was to enlarge it and make it a major feature and use it as one of the places they received foreign dignitaries and such. Up until then, it had just been kind of the garden behind the White House.
We did have, and I want to move on, but I do, before we do, we did have a very good discussion with someone who was very gracious and commented on one of the previous streams that from where they are, crime has gone down in D.C., and that they felt like they didn't get a chance to go out and go do things, and now they could. It sounded a lot like sort of what Trump said that he's heard, people are families can finally go out to dinner. I don't know if it was a bot or not, but I engaged and said, look, where are you? Could you tell us a little bit about your experiences? So we have somebody who's reporting firsthand experience that crime has gone down in DC, and I would imagine it probably has. But it was already, DC was not the crime-ridden, again, of the 80s, which was absolutely insane. And there are other cities that could probably use that help more, to the point now where we're getting reports, especially from family, who say that they're getting calls from their kids who are saying that either A, they were making more money doing whatever their job was before they got called into this, and they're not needed here, and they're actually being put to service landscaping. So they're raking leaves, there's basically nothing to do. They're being out there for 12 hours a day. They're not getting the same pay, and they're not actually doing anything, and that morale has plummeted in the DC in the National Guard units there. They're expected to be extended through the end of December. I have no idea how that works. My understanding is mission has already been accomplished. Crime has been ended in DC. I think Trump declared that, but I don't know. Any final thoughts on? And it is costing $1 million a day. So for Republicans who are money conscious, why are we spending $1 million a day to have the National Guard raking leaves when they could be, either at a city that wants them and could use them, or at home? Any final thoughts before we move on? No. Yes. I ask silly questions, I know.
There's almost nothing you can say because it's so patently absurd. If there was a huge problem and it's now gone, then they should be demobilized. But he doesn't want to do that because he wants to show that, I still control the military and I can use it as a weapon to crush all my opponents. When I falsify the midterm elections, I'm going to have the military out there to crush you when you say that I've done that.
Well, and to be fair, there are... thank you, Titan. To be fair, and I think that this is something that we do need to remember, there still are Subway sandwich shops out there arming people, and until we get an amendment to the Constitution that says that you cannot give a Subway sandwich to just anybody who asks for one, because they could throw it at it. Yeah.
When Subway sandwiches are banned, only criminals will have Subway sandwiches. We must not allow a Subway sandwich gap to develop.
Yeah. Oh, dear Lord. I really would. I would show that video again because it's so absurd, except that in my view, it just feels like it's feeding into what they want. It's just that video. Yeah. We do have, Titan did send us this, which I appreciate. Thank you, Titan. It's, commemorative. Donald Trump has been into these commemorative plates and plaques, as you know. So
and soap and aftershave and God knows what else.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very important things. Yes, absolutely. So to commemorate the Battle of Washington, D.C., we at In Time would like to make you aware of.
That's brilliant.
Thank you, Titan. So, as you know, my BA's in psychology and philosophy. I like to bring the philosophy element out, and my father was a lawyer, and I asked him as a kid all the time, "What's the law about?" And he would say, "It's about stopping violence." And I had a real hard time with that as a kid. I wanted to hear it's about justice and this and that. And he's like, no, it's about stopping violence. And the lessons that he would tell me really didn't make sense until I got a lot older and started to see it, and especially until I read Hobbes, the Leviathan, and, you know, man's state of nature, and the difference between civilization and state of nature really is finding a way to compromise, and that's what the law is really about. And we could make improvements to the legal system that would streamline it, but nobody wants to for a variety of reasons. One of them is they're just like, you know, basically if both sides have to keep spending money to argue with each other, eventually they calm down enough that they just say, fuck it, and walk away. That's literally, there is that element to it. There's a reason why judges say, okay, we'll book you out. You know, our next hearing will be in 2 or 4 months. They want everyone to calm down. Now, the whole point of the Justice Department isn't really to bring justice. It's to stop people from killing each other, because if your only recourse is somebody chops down or burns down your house, even if it's by accident, somebody burns down your house, you may go out and kill them. But if there's a recourse, if you can sue, if they can go to jail, if there's a means by which you can get some of that money back, I don't know whether it's justice or not, but it's better than you going to jail for murder. So everybody is stopped from committing violence by having this system that we can, you know, partake in. And it's a pretty flawed system. But again, justice was never really the goal. It was just trying to get everybody calm enough that we can survive as a society collectively. And that feels like a cynical way to talk about it, but it really seems like that's the way it works. And we haven't found anything that works better because we're still too closely related to our ape relatives and descendants. So I said all that to get to something which I think is absolutely extraordinary. We heard the Epstein victims, 10 of them, speak. That 10 is of 200 confirmed victims. And I would like to point this out, which is that the Justice Department has repeatedly said that they have prosecuted everyone that they can prosecute for the Epstein case. And yet we know that there's at least 200 victims, and we know that because that's how many the judge found there to be. And the people who've been actually investigating this, which include those defense attorneys, say that there could be in the thousands. But let's just take the lower number, 200. You can't tell me that only 2 people are guilty of victimizing those 200 people. And they certainly, we knew it was 36 when the FBI had Epstein in 2008. And the FBI had him, and they let him go. They let him go. So what you have is justice not being rendered until finally earlier this week when they said, we're going to compose our own Epstein list. And everyone kept saying, why don't you release the names right now? They can't. As individuals, they can't, because if they do, they're going to get sued. They could get murdered. Speaking of violence, if one of them sits down and says, well, X, Y, and Z, a famous billionaire, committed these heinous crimes, that billionaire, one of two things is going to happen. Either he's going to get away with it, or he's going to jail. He is going to spend every penny he's got doing whatever it takes to make sure that it's the first one, and because there's no point in holding back. So whether it's paying people to intimidate the witnesses, kill whatever it takes, because otherwise he's in jail for the rest of his life anyway. This is exactly what happens. This is what you would expect when the independent, neutral party, which is supposed to be the government, in this case, deliberately drops the ball and says, no, we are not going to engage in an attempt to defuse the situation, to get justice for the victims, to defend the other side, and they have to do it themselves. They say, yeah, we're going to compose our own list, and we're going to read it in Congress, in the floor of the House, which would be staggering. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I'll start by saying I think your assessment of what the judicial system is for may have been true 50, 40 years ago. I think today it has morphed into something very different. It is a system designed explicitly to protect the wealth and privilege of the oligarchic class. Everything else is secondary. And the way it's being manipulated now is obvious that that's what's going on. We get all of these names of big, powerful, important people getting associated with all sorts of different crimes, and nothing is done. But be some poor schmuck who throws a sandwich at somebody.
Yeah.
And we're going to have the full weight of the entire system crush you. Can't have that. That's dangerous. It's lawlessness.
I think that's yeah. Please.
The whole thing of rounding up the undocumented immigrants. It was supposed to be focused on those who were criminals, not because they were undocumented, but because they'd done some sort of violent crime here in the U.S. That went by the wayside almost the instant that Trump took office.
Yeah.
And it was just a generic, if they look Hispanic, round them up and deport them. I don't care if they were born here in the U.S. and their grandparents were born here and their great-grandparents were born here. Deport them. I don't like them. And the judicial system is basically going, yup. Yeah, you get some judges that are trying to stop things. But in most cases, when those rulings go up the ladder and hit the Supreme Court, that 6-3 majority says, no, the Orange God King has ruled it. It is, Muhammad coming down with the tablets.
Yeah.
That's Moses, I'm sorry, but you get my drift.
Yes. The deference that the Supreme Court pays to Trump is staggering. It is religious in its feel to me. It's just this it's deference to the likes of which, wow. Which is why, and people have said that when the Posse Comitatus, so as of this moment, Donald Trump has been found guilty of violating the Posse Comitatus Act. There was a trial. You didn't hear about it because it was a bench trial. It was just the judge. And I referenced the decision earlier, and I used the word, in this trial we have, so it was an actual trial. It's going to be appealed to the Ninth Circuit, and then from there it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Whichever side wins, it's going to go to the Supreme Court. Now, a number of people have said, okay, this is Posse Comitatus. This is a qualitatively different thing than everything else that's gone up before the Supreme Court. They're absolutely going to take the usual conservative position and say no, and strike it down. I am not nearly as convinced because it really is this kind of cultish worship, and from people who don't have to. There are people who I get it. You can see how and why they worship Donald Trump the way they do. But at some point, the whole point behind lifetime appointments is once you're in the Supreme Court, you can do whatever you want, and the president, nobody else can throw you out. And that has not, everybody is still, nope, we're going to do exactly what Trump wants. Any thoughts about what the Supreme Court's going to do about Posse Comitatus?
Given their earlier ruling about him, whatever he does while he's serving in his official capacity, you can't prosecute him for it. And so if he declared that I want the National Guard to act as law enforcement, they'll go, yep, well, that's what he wanted to do. That's what it does.
This judge did point that out, actually. Judge Breyer, the junior Judge Breyer here, pointed out that in normal circumstances, he could either fine or imprison Trump or do something like that for having violated Posse Comitatus, but because of these prior rulings, he can't do that. So all that's left to him is his regular federal powers of ordering Trump never to do it again, which is sort of like Trump broke the law. I was like, wait a minute, you broke the law. I am ordering you not to break the law again. Okay.
Well, it goes back to, and I've mentioned this on the show before, most of the time when presidents take office, there's a portrait put up of their favorite president in the Oval Office.
Yes.
And you typically get Lincoln or Washington or Jefferson or what have you. Trump's is Andrew Jackson. And one of the most notable things about Jackson is he's the president who basically said, after the Supreme Court ruled that something was illegal and had to be overturned, he basically said, well, let's see you try to enforce that ruling, and went about doing it anyway.
Yep.
Trump loves that notion of nobody being able to question his decisions, because all the power rests with me. I can crush you if you disagree with me. That's his mentality. And it has been forever. I mean, you look at his business doings before all his involvement in politics, and it was exactly the same kind of thing. People that went against him, you know, he'd use his mob connections to have them threatened, to have their businesses burned. He'd tie them up in courts with stupid rulings just to drag the case out because he had enough money to keep lawyers going, and the other side didn't. They had to cave in. That's the way he did business. And that's the way he's doing business in the White House today.
And it's public knowledge. I mean, Michael Cohen had to talk about all of this stuff after he, pled guilty, and he's the amount of he really is. He's a gangster. He's a mobster, and he loves that mentality. The thing is, thank God he's not as good at it as he could be. Dunk on you, $20. Just off to work. Good to see you all. Slava Ukraini, Heroyam Slava. Spasibo Bolshoya. Thank you so much for the super chat. We appreciate it. We appreciate your continued support, Dunk. Thank you so much for that. We really do. It means a lot. So thank you. And Duncan, you also gave us gifted 5 in-time memberships. So welcome to the new members. I think my personal account got a membership a short while ago. So thank you very much for that, Dunk. So I was heartened by seeing the defense attorneys in the this case, and we've heard Alan Dershowitz has said that, and Alan Dershowitz represented Epstein in the sweetheart deal that he got with the state in 2008. He would know what was used to leverage the state to charge Epstein with 1 count. They had 36 counts according to the FBI, and they charged him with 1, and he got the absolute minimum he could get for it. So Dershowitz has said that there are absolutely other people involved. It goes all the way to the top. We would know who these people are, and that he wants the Epstein files released because he wants his name exonerated. It has been said that he's in the Epstein files not just as Epstein's lawyer, but also as a client. He has denied the second part. As for the first part, as much as I hate to say it, everyone deserves a lawyer, but Jesus. So Dershowitz says he wants the files released. So we know that the government itself has been hiding this. We know that Trump is in it. We've heard that from leaked sources from the FBI. We've heard that from deposition from one woman who was molested by Trump at the age of 14, at least in her sworn testimony. This is what she says. And we know that Trump knew Epstein well and that he was doing this to hundreds of victims. So it's not a huge shock. So we have now these victims who have said publicly they're going to create their own list. Now, somebody had asked, why do they keep being so deferential to Trump and saying, like, please, sir, help us. We're victims. You can help us by release, if they know that he's involved. It's because it adds pressure to him because, now, he's being asked by, and then people are going to hopefully start to ask, well, why aren't you helping them? That aside, to hear how seriously those lawyers took it, the main one has been doing this pro bono the whole time. To hear how seriously the congressman took it, it seemed like the members of Congress involved were taking this more seriously than. I've heard Stump's speeches on everything all the time. I worked on the Obama campaign. I've heard Obama's speeches on it. There's a guy who could make you feel empowered. But the ones that I've heard about this, do you think that there's any possibility of there being forward motion on this, of them maybe getting something with coming out with their own list, and or a subpoena forcing the Justice Department to release the files publicly? Or do you think that this is just going to be shut down and it's going to continue until it fizzles?
Yep, it'll be shut down. If the victims, try to go public with the stuff, they'll find some way to silence them. If it does come out, then they'll make sure it gets absolutely minimal airplay. It's just, if you try to open an investigation, they'll shut it down in Congress. It won't happen, because this is too damaging. It's of the nature that a significant portion, not probably a majority, but a significant minority of the MAGAs will look at that and be unforgiving. There are lines you cross. A pedophile, that's one of those lines that will set them off. And remember, the whole MAGA movement is really a very loose alliance of different groups. You got Christo-fascists, and you got the end timers, and you've got the oligarchs, and all of these people. They don't necessarily agree with one another on their view of what America should be, but there's enough commonality that they can manipulate those people to band together until it starts falling apart. And the evidence has suggested that the Epstein files are one of those things that will cause it to fall apart, or at least begin to.
It'll cause a significant chunk to break off, whether or not that's big enough to, and or soon enough to either alter the midterms, or that's why Texas is taking the midterms so seriously, because they are going to lose more than 5 at the rate there. So and the weaponization of that. Before we get to that, LJ just said this. I thought this was true. It's just like, I was watching Marjorie Taylor Greene and I was listening to her speak. I was just like, that sounds sane. That's weird. Is Marjorie Taylor Greene? That's a cohesive sentence. It was a bizarre feeling to be agreeing with Marjorie. I mean, that was unique. That was unique. Seeing Marjorie Taylor, you don't look as
There's been speculation that she and Boebert and some of the others from that branch are getting marching orders from the Kremlin that they're to start undermining Trump. They want Trump gone because he's not doing what Putin told him to do, which is end all support for Ukraine. And Putin is upset by this. And so people have speculated that he's trying to use his influence with certain elements of the party, which are known to be associated, have close ties with the Russians, that those are being told to start pushing back and trying to undermine Trump's position. And that kind of makes sense in some ways because of the rumors of failing health. And, you want to set it up so that you can start grooming your person to take over after Trump leaves. And Vance isn't their person. He may be, in their pay. I don't know. But I think they know that he's not the guy with the right level of charisma to keep the alliance together.
Yep.
And so that's what they're looking for, is who can they groom to do that? Who has the popularity amongst the MAGA group to become the successor?
And for those of us, we've had these discussions before. It's really amazing. First of all, if you look at a lot of the Epstein stuff, especially the emails that were released about 2 weeks ago. He worked with the Russians, he worked with the Israelis, he worked with everybody. And one of the things that he said, and this is something that we hear from the oligarchy class. So this is something that you've introduced me to that I like very much and have been sort of adopting into the rest of these discussions, which is the idea that there really is an oligarchy class that has nothing to do with in capitalism. It's the wealthy. And it is in Russia too. But they don't care about capitalism or socialism or communism. They don't care whether you're Jewish or Christian or whatever. They care about the money. That's it. That's all. When Mitch McConnell, who wanted to stay in office, realized that he was going to lose. He was going to lose until he rebuilt an aluminum plant in Kentucky. That money came from the aluminum king, Oleg Desparov, or Desparka, whatever his name is, who was sanctioned at the time, but Mitch McConnell was able to get an individual sanction just for him so that he could put all that money into Kentucky so that McConnell could say, see, I got the jobs. And the argument for that is, well, the money is going to the United States, except Oleg is getting money too from this plant, and the reality is you're violating the sanctions. But hey, everybody's making money, so it's okay. And Mitch McConnell is the best example we've got of this. But I think absolutely, everybody in Trump's upper echelons
and
there
another
are part of this.
That is that class owes more allegiance or loyalty, if you will, to the class itself, not to nations. They're much more interested in their buddies from everywhere around whatever their country is. And pursuing a national objective really isn't in their interest as far as they're concerned, as long as they're getting money out of it.
Well, and again, take a look at who Epstein was talking to. It was Peter Thiel and Ehud Barak, a former prime minister of Israel. Neither of these men cared about politics at the time. They cared about how to make money off of, now I've forgotten, 𝐒𝐚𝐬, whatever the name was of the business that they created, which got I think it was 15 million from the Defense Department for a product that didn't exist. So, yeah. My last question, I'd been meaning to ask this earlier. You had said that my view was probably closer to accurate on the justice system maybe 50 to 40 years ago. We can take a look and say when Trump appointed the Supreme Court, that's when this solidified into an oligarchy class that's heading towards essentially a fascist state that wants a fascist state and is following the Nazi playbook to do it. And I don't listen. I'm a guy who on Twitter for 5 years got into arguments with people and never called one person a liar because I don't like to use hyperbole, and I want to be believed myself. It's rare that I say these kinds of things, but I'm saying it because this is what it looks like to me. When do you think it began to flip that way? Was there either a president, a specific ruling, Citizens United, before that, after that? Was it 2008? I would say
it starts in earnest under Reagan. Prior to that, it was definitely there, but they didn't have the ability to control and influence events. And it's about that time, actually a little bit earlier, that the people that want these things realized that they could do it if they adopted a long view rather than a short-term view. So they actually start out trying to influence elections, not at the national level, but at the state levels, and in some cases, even municipal levels. And once you start getting your people to control state houses, then you can start changing state election laws, districting of districts and so forth. And then you make the next step, which is to start influencing national level stuff. And eventually you can work your way into the presidency. And when I say long term, I mean the people that were behind this stuff when it initially started knew that they were not going to be around when the fruit came off the tree.
So they were serious enough about, especially if it started during the Reagan times, yeah. So they were so diehard in their beliefs that they were starting this back then, this to see this ideology through. Wow.
I mean, it's about then that you start seeing the whole prosperity gospel thing starting to achieve national momentum.
Yeah.
That's part of it. And then the fine tuning of, okay, we throw a little racism into it, and we can start bringing in all those old Democrats who hated civil rights, and they'll join us. And, it goes on and on like that. And then you start telling small business owners, oh, yeah, we'll change the tax structure and you'll do fine, except it's exactly the opposite. They want to put the little guys out of business so that only the big guys own the business. But the little guys are too gullible and not aware enough to catch on to that reality.
Well, and the idea of the American dream is a powerful one. I think that's sort of what we're seeing here too, which is people who sit there and say, well, this is America. It's not going to happen here because this is a different place. So you can trust your politician when he says your small business will be fine, I'm going to take care of it. And you can trust law enforcement when they say we're not interested in going after illegal immigrants who are nonviolent and in fact participating in society, and you can believe that you're going to get a fair trial if you get picked up by ICE. None of which is true. All right. Well, any final thoughts before we go?
I would watch what's going on in the Caribbean with regards to Venezuela. Some people speculated he was planning to invade. I don't think that's the case, but I would not be surprised if he's going to transition all this eventually into a blockade. He needs an enemy. And that's one of the problems right now is there's no enemy for him to focus people's attention on external to the U.S. He could do it with Russia, but he doesn't want to for many reasons, not the least of which is he's got loans that are unsecured with Deutsche Bank because he was countersigned by the Russians. And if the Russians say, well, we're taking that back, his whole empire crumbles.
Yep.
So, yeah, he knows he is pushing on Putin, but he's not going to push too hard because he knows there would be a pushback that would be grievous for him.
As you say, a little bit of kabuki theater there. He's pushing back, and making it look like I'm not afraid of him, but I'm only going to give him a little tap back in resistance.
Well, if you look at some of the images that came out of the Alaska meeting, and I won't say whether or not I thought that was a stand-in, not the real Putin, but regardless, there's a point where he has a private conversation in the Beast, which is that armored limo that he goes around everywhere with just him and Putin and a translator. And when the meeting's over, his aides all come and they're, flustering around him like they usually do. And suddenly they all start going in different directions and they're ashen-faced. I think at that point, what happened is Putin or his stand-in for Putin, laid down the law, the message, the ultimatum, whatever, is you can't push me beyond this point. You need to start behaving or there will be negative fallout for you. And when he conveyed that to his people, they got really scared. Because what is the information? You know, we know they've got compromising information on him, probably something connected with Epstein.
Yeah, that's the one that I always, whenever you say compromising information, I always think back to the hotel, but they probably have something much more recent, because if Epstein worked with any intelligence agency, and you would suggest it, I think this makes a lot of sense. They're all connected. So he ended up working with multiple ones. That's how and why he was able to get off in 2008, which means if Mossad and the CIA had access to what he had, the Russians got it somewhere. there's no, so the Russians have it. What I also find mildly disappointing, but it's the human attention span. We aren't very good at these kinds of things. Everyone said, wow, this was a really great meeting. Trump laid down the law beforehand. He's like, no, these are the requirements that he's going to have to meet. There's going to be a ceasefire. We're not going to discuss land this time. We will discuss it, but not this time. And we will, and all of these things. And everyone said, wow, this is Trump the big man going out and doing these things. And when he comes out, he's like, look, Ukraine's going to have to give up some land. and there's not going to be a ceasefire until they agree that they're giving up the land. And he walked back everything. He lost on every point that he said was important to him and was non-negotiable going in. And he comes out and says, yeah, exactly. He tacos the whole thing, and people say, touchdown, he won, he scored. It's like he just walked back everything he said he wasn't negotiating on. And Putin didn't give up a thing. Putin won everything and the entire thing. And Trump won.
Yeah.
And I'm the crazy
You'll
one
notice
in the
that
conversation.
Trump claims victory and never gets Putin to change one scintilla of his demands.
Yep. It is some of the most beautiful and elegant goalpost moving I have ever seen in my life. It's just those goalposts. It's just like, I could have sworn they were on that side of the field, and now they're over there. And nobody moved the ball, but we scored a touchdown, and that was great. Well, sir, you have frittered away another hour with me on Downtime. Thank you so much for coming on. It was delightful as always.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience. There's a lot of discussion going on, and at some points I came in and checked in, but I also try to pay attention to Lance as he's talking, because he always has very interesting things to say. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to Sinister Porpoise, Stephen Walsh, and Dunk on You, all of whom super chatted and donated during this. That really does help keep the show going. Our next scheduled show is Tuesday night, 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with the Xandering. Xandering and I have just been, but we definitely want to talk, so we will... and actually, I'd like to see if maybe he's free prior, because I'd like to get his input on some of these things. So we may have another show prior, and we will have a show tomorrow's Friday. So I think there's a decent
Something
chance
always drops on Friday.
Something's going to happen on Friday, and so we will carry that breaking and live. Remember to like and subscribe. That's how you're going to find out when we go live, and we do go live with breaking news, and I think we do a good job of it. So. Hope you'll subscribe and go check out our Discord, and you can see our discussions on all of this, and you can ask the commander a question if you have any. He's very good about taking people's questions on the Discord. Lance, once again, thank you very much, and we will see you next week. Good night.
Take care.